I remember the exact moment I saw him. September. A gray Wednesday afternoon on a Greyhound bus crawling through upstate New York on its way from Buffalo to New York City. I was 20 years old, a junior at SUNY Albany, and I was going to see my boyfriend of 14 months, a boy named Trevor who went to Columbia and who I had met at a summer internship 2 summers before. Trevor was everything a college girlfriend was supposed to want: tall, preppy, headed for law school, the kind of man whose family had opinions about wine. We had been doing the long-distance thing since September of the previous year, and the relationship had taken on the texture of an obligation, something I maintained because I had invested in it, not because it fed me. The bus was half empty. I had claimed a window seat in the middle section, my headphones in, my Discman playing something I don't remember now, my body curled against the cold of the AC vent that was blowing directly on my neck no matter how I angled myself. We were maybe an hour outside of the city when I looked up from my book, a trashy romance novel I had bought at a rest stop, the kind with a shirtless man on the cover that I would have been embarrassed to read in public, and saw him. He was sitting 3 rows ahead and across the aisle. Dark hair, slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck in a way that suggested he either had good hair genes or a good barber or both. A jawline that looked like it had been designed by someone who studied classical sculpture in their spare time. He was reading something on his phone, a long article, from the look of it, scrolling slowly, and his lips moved slightly as he read, the way some people's do when they're processing difficult text. He had a way of sitting that was unusual for a young man, still, but not tense, like he was comfortable in his body in a way that most people his age hadn't learned to be yet. I stared at him for a full 30 seconds before I realized I was staring. Then he looked up, and I looked away. Too fast. Embarrassingly, transparently fast, like a child caught taking cookies from a jar. I looked back at my book, but the words had stopped making sense. My heart was doing something arrhythmic in my chest, a syncopated beat that had nothing to do with the caffeine I had consumed that morning and everything to do with the way the stranger's eyes had met mine for one unguarded instant before we both looked away. He looked like a male model. He looked like someone's favorite actor. He looked like trouble. And I wanted him immediately. Not in the abstract, hypothetical way that women sometimes say they want things. In a specific, physical, cellular way, the way you want water when you're dying of thirst, the way you want air when you've been holding your breath too long. I wanted to know what his skin smelled like. I wanted to know what his voice sounded like saying my name. I wanted to know what it felt like to be touched by hands that looked like that. The wanting was so sudden and so total that it frightened me. I had been with Trevor for 14 months. I had never looked at another man and felt this. I had never looked at anyone and felt this. It was as if something had been waiting inside me all along, a capacity for desire that I hadn't known I possessed, and this stranger on a bus had somehow activated it, just by existing, just by being in the same enclosed space with me, just by existing in the world at a time when I was capable of seeing him. I got off the bus in the Port Authority 4 hours later, went to meet Trevor at a coffee shop near his dorm, and spent the entire evening comparing Trevor's face to the face I couldn't stop thinking about. Trevor had a good face. Trevor's face was fine, symmetrical, pleasant, the face of someone who would grow into respectability if not attractiveness. But it did not do to me what that stranger's face had done, ref something in my hindbrain, set off some alarm that said *this. This is what you are looking for *. Trevor and I broke up 2 weeks later. It wasn't because of the busboy. I didn't even know his name yet, and what kind of person leaves a boyfriend because of a stranger on a bus? That was insane. I left Trevor because Trevor had been texting his lab partner, a girl named Courtney who used too many exclamation points, and when I found the messages, flirty, familiar, The kind of texts that said more about the state of his attention than any explicit admission could. I realized I didn't care. I should have cared. The fact that I didn't care told me everything I needed to know about the state of my investment. But even as I deleted Trevor's number, I was thinking about the bus. About his face. About whether I would ever see him again, and what it would mean if I did. ## Chapter 2, Derek. I found him on Facebook 3 weeks later. It was not difficult. His face was distinctive enough that when I typed Derek into the search bar, a pure shot in the dark, based on nothing but the rhythm of his name in my head when I imagined saying it, which was something I had been doing more than I would ever admit to anyone, the algorithm delivered him like a gift. Derek Harrison, 23. Based in New York City. Graduate of Stuyvesant High School, currently attending Columbia University. Columbia. The same school Trevor had gone to. The same school I had visited 3 times and never once seen this man's face. The same institution that had, through some cosmic coincidence I didn't believe in but couldn't explain away, placed us on the same bus at the same time on the same gray afternoon in September. I sent him a message. I don't know what I expected. I had no photo of him. I had been too flustered on the bus to screenshot his Facebook page, and I had no idea if he would even remember me. The message was short, direct, and humiliating in retrospect. *Chi, I think we were on the same Greyhound bus from Buffalo to NYC in September. I'm the girl who kept staring at you. His response came 11 minutes later. Holy shit. You're serious? I'm serious. I can't believe you found me. I can't either, honestly. So what now? I stared at that question for a long time. What now? The honest answer was that I wanted to climb inside his skin and live there. The honest answer was that I had broken up with my boyfriend because of him, which was insane, which I would never tell anyone, which I barely admitted to myself. The honest answer was that I was not a person who did things like this. I was a girl from a suburb of Syracuse whose parents had been married for 30 years and who believed, with the kind of certainty that comes from never having been tested, that relationships should be logical, that love should be earned, that desire was something you managed, not something that managed you. But I was also a girl who had driven 4 hours on a Greyhound to stare at a stranger's face, and who had broken up with her boyfriend 2 weeks later because she couldn't stop thinking about that stranger, and who had just sent a Facebook message to that stranger and was now waiting, with her heart in her throat, for a response that would determine the next chapter of her life. Now we get coffee, I typed. If you want. I want. ## Chapter 3, The First Date. Our first date was at a coffee shop on Amsterdam Avenue in late October. I wore a blue sweater I had owned since high school and jeans that were too tight in the way I knew they were too tight, deliberately, calculatedly too tight, the kind of clothing that makes a statement whether the statement is intentional or not. I was nervous in the specific way that only matters of genuine consequence can make you nervous, not because I cared about the outcome, but because I cared about the outcome too much to pretend I didn't. He was taller than I remembered. Or maybe I had forgotten, in the weeks between the bus and the coffee shop, how his height registered in my body. He was wearing a gray peacoat that looked expensive and scuffed leather boots that looked like they had been well used, and he smiled when he saw me walk in, a smile that rearranged something fundamental in my chest, like furniture being moved in a room I thought I knew. "Madison," he said, standing up. "Wow. Wow. You look," he paused, searching for a word. There was something careful about the way he spoke, like he was choosing each word from a limited supply. Different from the bus. I was wearing headphones on the bus. "Yeah, but you seemed," he stopped again. "Never mind. Sit down. Tell me about yourself. We talked for 3 hours. I learned that he was a senior at Columbia, studying economics with a minor in something he couldn't quite remember because he had stopped attending those lectures. He was from a town in New Jersey that I had never heard of, a place with a name that sounded invented, the kind of suburb that could have been a set piece in a 90s sitcom about affluent suburban life. His parents were both accountants who had emigrated from Taiwan before he was born, which meant he was second-generation Chinese American, which meant he had inherited both the academic pressure of immigrant expectations and the cultural dislocation of not quite belonging anywhere. He had a younger sister who was still in high school and who, according to Derek, was destined for greatness or total disaster, and there's no way to know which until it's too late. I learned that he was funny, dry and deadpan, the kind of funny that catches you off guard because it arrives without warning, like a door opening in a wall you didn't know was there. He made jokes about his major, economics, the only field where you learn to predict the future by studying the past, and then are consistently wrong about both about New York, everyone here is either a struggling artist or a struggling lawyer. The struggling artists have more fun, but the struggling lawyers have better health insurance about the coffee shop we were in, this place is aggressively mediocre. I love it about himself, I'm the kind of person who overthinks everything, including whether I'm overthinking things, which I've definitely done at least once in this conversation already. I learned that he had been in a serious relationship in high school that ended badly and that he had not dated anyone seriously since. He said this casually, almost offhandedly, in the context of explaining why he didn't go to parties very often, why he spent so much time studying, why he had never been to a single fraternity formal despite being invited to at least a dozen. I don't do casual, he said, stirring his coffee with a plastic stirrer. He had ordered a plain black coffee, no milk, no sugar, nothing to soften the bitterness, and he drank it like it was water, without ceremony. I know that's weird for a college guy to say. Most guys my age claim to want something serious and then immediately try to sleep with you on the first date. But I'm not most guys. I've done the casual thing, and it made me feel like shit. So now I just don't. That's mature, I said. That's depressed, he said, laughing. But his eyes were serious. I did not tell him that I had broken up with Trevor because of him. I did not tell him that I had driven to New York to see Trevor and spent the whole time thinking about his face. I did not tell him that I was already, after 3 hours, more invested in this conversation than I had been in my entire 14-month relationship. I didn't tell him any of this because it was too much, too fast, too revealing of the kind of person I was when I wanted something badly, and I wanted him, I was realizing, in a way I had never wanted anyone. What I did was reach across the table and touch his hand. He flinched. Not away, just a small, startled movement, like a cat when a door slams unexpectedly. Then he looked at my hand on his, and his expression did something complicated, a flicker of want crossed with something I couldn't read, something that looked almost like fear, and then he turned his palm up and let his fingers curl around mine. We left the coffee shop and walked north along the Hudson. It was cold, the kind of October cold that feels like a warning, like the weather is telling you to prepare for something. He put his arm around me after a block, and I leaned into him, and we walked like that for an hour without talking, just breathing in the smell of him, clean laundry and some kind of cologne I couldn't name, something warm and woodsy that made me want to press my face into his jacket and stay there. At some point we stopped on a pedestrian bridge over the Henry Hudson Parkway, looking down at the river. The city was turning gold and orange around us, autumn in New York, the trees on the New Jersey side on fire with color. The traffic below was a distant hum, a white noise that made the moment feel more private, more contained, Like we were the only two people in the world, even though we were standing on a bridge in the middle of a major metropolitan area. "I'm really glad you messaged me," he said. Yeah? Yeah. I thought about you after the bus. I kept thinking I was going to see you again. Why didn't you try to find me?" He looked at me sideways. "Because that would have been creepy. You could have said hi. On a Greyhound bus? After you looked away from me like I had the plague?" He laughed. "I'm not that guy, Madison. I don't chase people who don't want to be chased." I thought about that for a moment. What if I did want to be chased? He stopped walking. He turned to face me. In the late afternoon light, his face was half in shadow, half illuminated, and the effect was something out of a film. The kind of scene you replay in your head for years because it captured something about a specific moment that you know you'll never get back. "I don't chase," he said again, quieter this time. "But I follow." I kissed him. It was the first time. Not a first kiss in the sense of a first kiss with a new person. This was something more significant than that. This was the first time I had kissed someone I wanted so badly that the wanting felt like a diagnosis. My whole body was involved. My hands in his hair, my chest against his, the whole animal machinery of desire engaging in a way I had read about but never experienced. He tasted like coffee and cold air and something underneath that was just him, just the essence of who he was, the flavor of a person I was already becoming addicted to. He kissed me back with the kind of controlled intensity that made me want to climb inside him and live in his ribcage. His hands were on my waist, firm and deliberate, and when I pressed forward he made a sound, low, involuntary, a sound of want, and then he pulled back. "We should slow down," he said. "I don't want to slow down." "I know. But we should." "Tell me why." "Not here." He looked around. We were on a public bridge. A jogger ran past. Someone's dog barked somewhere. "Can I see you again?" "Tomorrow?" "Yes." "Okay. Tomorrow." He put me on a train back to Albany that night. I sat in my seat with my heart hammering and my lips still tingling and the taste of him in my mouth, and I knew, with the certainty of someone who has just been hit by a car and is lying on the asphalt watching the sky, that I was in trouble. ## Chapter 4, The Withholding. We dated for 8 months. They were the most sexually charged months of my life, and also the most sexually frustrating. Derek was not like any man I had ever been with. He was attentive in ways that made me melt. He remembered the name of my favorite song. He noticed when I changed my shampoo. He sent me articles about topics I had mentioned once in passing, like he was collecting information about me and filing it away for future reference. He was funny and warm, and when he looked at me it was with an intensity that made me feel like the only person in any room we entered. He remembered the name of my roommate, my mother's birthday, the title of the book I was reading. He noticed when I was tired, when I was sad, when I needed to talk about something but didn't know how to start. He anticipated my needs before I voiced them, which was either a sign of extraordinary emotional intelligence or a sign that he was paying attention to me in a way that no one ever had before, and I wasn't sure which possibility was more frightening. But he would not sleep with me. Not for lack of trying. I tried everything. I wore lingerie I couldn't afford, a black lace that I bought at a boutique in Albany that made me feel like a fraud and a goddess at the same time. I suggested we stay at hotels, which felt bold and sophisticated in my head and embarrassing and desperate in practice. I told him I wanted him, explicitly, directly, without ambiguity or coyness, using words that I had never used with Trevor, words that I hadn't known were in my vocabulary until I said them out loud to this man on this bridge in this autumn light. And he wanted me. I could feel it, The way you feel heat from a fire even when you're not standing directly in front of it. The way you feel gravity when you step off a ledge without meaning to. He wanted me so badly that sometimes, when we were kissing and his hands were on my body, he would make those sounds again, that low, involuntary vocalization of desire that I had heard on the bridge and that I had replayed in my memory so many times it had become its own kind of aphrodisiac. I would feel triumph surge through me, thinking, yes, now, this is it, finally, finally. But then he would stop. Every time. Without exception. At the exact moment when we were closest, when I was most sure he would finally cross the line, would finally take what I was offering and give me what I was asking for, he would pull back. Not abruptly. Not with anger. Just with a quiet, firm restraint that left me gasping on the other side of a door that never opened, like a dog sitting outside a closed door, waiting. Our 10th date was at a hotel near Columbia. We had dinner at a Thai restaurant, drank too much wine, and walked back to the hotel room he had booked with the kind of nervous energy that crackled between practicing how to take it off, practicing the sequence of movements that would make me look confident and desirable and not at all like a woman who had rehearsed undressing for a man she had been trying to seduce for 8 months. The moment we closed the hotel room door, he was on me. His hands in my hair, his mouth on my neck, his body pressing mine against the wall with a force that told me he had been wanting this as badly as I had. I reached for his belt. He let me. I unfastened it. I reached for his zipper. He let me do that too. And then I felt his hand close gently around my wrist. "Madison," he said. His voice was ragged. His eyes were dark with want. In the low light of the hotel room, they looked almost black, the pupils blown wide, the irises barely visible. "Don't stop. We should talk about this first." "There's nothing to talk about. I want you. You want me. What is there to discuss?" He was quiet for a moment. His hand was still on my wrist, not gripping, just resting there, a gentle pressure that could have been either tender or restraining, I couldn't tell which. His chest was rising and falling with uneven breaths. I could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, or maybe that was my own, pounding so hard I couldn't distinguish between the two. "I like you," he said. "I like you so much it scares me. So stop being scared. It's not that simple. It is that simple." "No." He released my wrist. He stepped back. He ran his hand through his hair, that gesture I had watched 100 times, that particular raking of fingers from forehead to crown that he did when he was processing something difficult, when he was trying to find the right words for something that resisted easy articulation. If we do this, I want it to mean something. I don't want it to be just bodies. I want it to be real. It is real. Derek, this is the most real thing I've ever felt. I know. But I need you to know that too. Not just feel it, know it. I stared at him. He was standing in the middle of that hotel room, shirt half untucked, belt undone, looking at me with an expression that was half desire and half anguish, the face of a man who wanted something and was choosing, deliberately, not to take it, as if refusing was its own form of love. "Okay," I said. "Okay. I know. I know it's real." He kissed me then. Softly. The kind of kiss that felt like a promise. We lay on the hotel bed for an hour, kissing, touching, doing everything except the one thing I needed. His hands mapped my body like he was memorizing it. His mouth found the sensitive spots behind my ear, the hollow of my throat, the curve of my collarbone. I arched into him, wanting more, always more, and he gave me more touch, more attention, more of himself in every way except the one way that mattered. At one point his hand slipped inside my dress and found the bare skin of my lower back, and he held it there, his palm flat against my spine, and I felt tears prick my eyes from sheer frustrated want. Not because it felt bad, because it felt so good, and because I knew it was going to stop, and because I didn't understand why it had to stop, and because I was starting to feel like there was something wrong with me, something I wasn't understanding, something I was missing. Tease, I whispered against his mouth. I'm not teasing. I'm savoring. I'm going to die of anticipation. Then you'll die happy. I didn't die. But I came close. Asterisk. Hashtag chapter 5, The Obsession. After the hotel, that first hotel, the first of 10, we settled into a rhythm that was both wonderful and maddening. He would take me to dinner. We would walk somewhere beautiful, the High Line, the Brooklyn Promenade, the roof of his apartment building where he had a string of fairy lights and 2 camping chairs and a view of the city that made the whole thing feel like a movie set. We would talk for hours about his classes, about my classes, about our families, about the future in the vague and tentative way that 20-somethings talk about the future, as if we had any idea what we were predicting. We would kiss until our lips were sore. And then we would go back to someone's room, his apartment, my rented room in Albany, another hotel when we wanted to feel like we were somewhere that belonged only to us, and we would do everything but. I became obsessed in a way that I recognized, intellectually, was unhealthy. I checked his Facebook like it was a medical device monitoring my vital signs. I scrolled through his old posts, reading the comments he had left on other people's photos, reconstructing the shape of his social life, mapping the topography of his relationships. I looked at the women who commented on his posts, their photos, their bios, the frequency and tenor of their interactions with him, and I tried to determine, from the context and content of their exchanges, whether any of them had ever been with him in the way I wanted to be with him. One comment caught my eye. It was from a girl named Phoebe Leon, posted 2 years before we met. The comment said, ***, no sex is true love. I stared at that comment for a long time. I didn't speak Chinese. I had to look up the translation, but when I understood what it said, the irony was not lost on me. Here was someone, presumably an ex-girlfriend, or a friend with benefits, or someone who knew him well enough to make a joke about his defining characteristic, who had apparently understood something about Derek that I was still struggling to accept. He did not do sex casually. He did not do sex until it meant something. He withheld sex not as a tease but as a policy, a declaration of principles that left me standing at the gates, panting, desperate, knowing that the treasure was on the other side and I simply did not have the right key. Or maybe I did, and he was simply too afraid to give it to me. I started to doubt myself. In the quiet of my rented room in Albany, alone at 2 a.m. while my roommate slept, I would lie in bed and replay every interaction we had ever had, searching for the moment where I had failed some invisible test. Was I too eager? Was I not eager enough? Did I seem like I was in it for the wrong reasons, using him to fill a hole left by Trevor, by my parents, by the general texture of my life which had always felt slightly too small for the person living inside it? I started to wonder if he simply didn't find me attractive enough. This became a fixation. I would look in the mirror and catalog my flaws, the nose I thought was too wide, the hips I thought were too narrow, the specific way my hair fell when I hadn't washed it. I would send him photos of myself, carefully lit, carefully angled, the kind of photos that took 15 minutes to get right and another 10 to select from the 30 or 40 attempts, waiting for his response with the same anxious hope I imagine cancer patients waiting for test results. He always responded with warmth. "You're beautiful," he would say, or "You're stunning," or simply "God, Madison," but the words felt insufficient. Words were cheap. Anyone could say words. What I needed was action. What I needed was for him to look at me the way I looked at him, like I was a meal and he was starving. He never did. Or rather, he did, but then he always stopped. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Like there was a version of reality where Derek and I were together, where we were happy, where we were having the kind of physical relationship that normal people have, and I was locked out of that reality, standing on the wrong side of a membrane I couldn't breach. Chapter 6, The Rival. In April of our senior year, Derek started talking about a coworker. Her name was Nicole. She was from his internship, a finance firm in Midtown where he had been working part-time since January. She was based in their Boston office but came to New York for quarterly meetings, and she was, from everything he told me, smart and driven and funny and beautiful in a way that was completely unlike the women he usually talked about. She was, he said, the kind of person who knows exactly what she wants and isn't apologetic about going after it. "She sounds great," I said, trying to keep my voice even. We were on the phone. I was in Albany. He was in his apartment, the fairy lights on his roof probably just coming on in the dusk. It was a ritual we had developed. He would text me when he got home from work, and we would talk for an hour or two before bed, and sometimes the call stretched past midnight and neither of us minded. "What's she like?" "She's intense. In a good way. She knows exactly what she wants and she's not apologetic about it." "Sounds familiar." "You're different. He paused. I could hear him thinking, could almost hear the gears turning as he searched for a word that wouldn't hurt me. "You're softer." Soft. The word lodged in my chest like a splinter. I had never thought of myself as soft. I thought of myself as a woman who knew what she wanted and went after it, who had gotten on a bus to find a stranger, who had pursued a man across the landscape of Facebook with the determination of a detective tracking a suspect. But maybe, to Derek, I was soft. Maybe soft was a compliment. Maybe soft was the opposite of intense, and intense was what he actually wanted. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you're gentle. You're kind. You don't bulldoze." "Nicole bulldozes?" "I didn't say that." "You implied it." He was quiet. The silence on phone stretched out, taut as a wire. "There's nothing going on between me and Nicole," he said finally. "I would tell you if there was." "I know." "Do you?" "Yes, Derek. I trust you." But I didn't trust him. I didn't trust anything. I had been in this relationship for 2 years, and I still did not have the one thing I wanted most, and I had no explanation for why, and every new piece of information about the women in his life felt like a door opening onto a room I was not allowed to enter. The relationship with Nicole did not become romantic. I know this because Derek told me, and because I monitored their interactions on Facebook with the paranoid attention of a border patrol agent, and because there was simply no evidence of anything that would suggest a physical or emotional connection beyond collegiality. They worked together. They were friendly. That was all. But that wasn't the point. The point was that Nicole was intense. Nicole knew what she wanted. Nicole was not soft. And Derek, if he ever did choose to give himself to someone, might choose someone more like Nicole than like me. Chapter 7, The End. The end came in May, on a night that had no particular drama to it. We were at his apartment. We had just come back from dinner, a Thai place on Columbus Avenue, our usual, the one where they knew his order and always gave us extra spring rolls without being asked. We were sitting on his couch, and I was leaning against his chest, and his hand was playing with my hair in that absent, affectionate way that he did when he was relaxed and happy and not thinking about anything in particular. I had been thinking about it all through dinner, the thing we never did, the act we never completed, the wall we never breached. And something in me had reached a limit. Not anger, exactly. Not even frustration. Something more like exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of wanting something so badly for so long and never receiving it. Like a hunger that has gone on so long you forget what it felt like to be full. I called my mom today, I said, out of nowhere. Okay. She's been asking about you. When she's going to meet you. He stiffened slightly beneath me. This was a sore subject. We had been dating for 2 years, and he had never met my parents, had never even talked to them on the phone. Every time I suggested it, he found a reason to defer. He was too busy with school. He wasn't ready. The timing wasn't right. Eventually I stopped suggesting, and the subject became one of the many unspoken agreements we had made without ever explicitly discussing them. Madison, I know you're not ready. I know you want to wait until you're out of school, until you have a job, until everything is perfect. But Derek, it's been 2 years. 2 years, and you won't even. He sat up. I sat up too. We faced each other on the couch, the television dark, the fairy lights casting constellations on the walls that looked like a promise of something romantic that was never going to arrive. I know, he said. I know it's been 2 years. Then why? Why won't you? Because I'm not ready. You'll never be ready. You said the same thing 6 months ago and 6 months before that. At what point do we acknowledge that not ready means not interested? His face changed. Something flickered across it, daring gone so fast I almost missed it, like a shadow passing over water. But I didn't miss it. I saw it. And what I saw was pain. Not the pain of rejection, not the pain of being caught in a lie, but the deeper pain of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has finally been asked to explain why. I am interested, he said quietly. I have never been more interested in anyone in my life. Then prove it. I can't. Why? He looked away. He looked at the fairy lights, the cheap plastic ones he had hung on his roof when he first moved in, the ones I had called romantic the first time I saw them and which now seemed like a metaphor for everything we were, decorative, atmospheric, casting light but not warmth. Because I promised someone I would wait. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were unexpected. I had always known there was something he wasn't telling me, some reason behind his refusal that went beyond simple nervousness or inexperience, but because they confirmed a suspicion I had been carrying for months, maybe years, a suspicion I had been afraid to examine too closely because I wasn't sure I could survive the answer. Who? I asked. He didn't answer. Derek. Who? He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to respond. Then, very softly, like someone confessing to a crime they had been hiding for years. My high school girlfriend. I stared at him. In 2 years of dating, he had never told me her name. He had mentioned her only once, briefly, in the context of explaining why he didn't do casual sex, and I had accepted that explanation without pressing because I trusted him and because I was so consumed by my own wanting that I never thought to question the architecture of his reluctance. Her name, I said. What was her name? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. He looked at me then. And in his eyes I saw something I had never seen before. Not desire, not warmth, not even the familiar, frustrating restraint that I had come to know so well. What I saw was grief. A loss so old and so deep that it had become part of the landscape of his face, as familiar as his bone structure, as defining as his smile. Her name was Christine, he said. And she died 3 years ago. A car accident. And before she died, I promised her I wouldn't be casual with anyone. That I would wait until I found someone I really loved. Really, truly, completely loved. He paused. His voice had gotten thick, the way voices do when someone is trying very hard not to cry. And I think I do. I think I love you, Maddie-san. But I'm scared that if we do this, if we make it physical, it will change things. And I've already lost someone I loved. I can't. His voice broke. Actually broke, the way a voice does when the person speaking it has held too much for too long and the container finally cracks. I reached for him. I pulled him against me. I held him on that couch while he cried, quietly, almost silently, the tears soaking into my shirt, and I realized, in the terrible clarity of that moment, that I was holding a man who had built a wall around his body so high and so thick that no one would ever be able to climb over it. Not because he didn't want to. Because he was afraid. Because the last time he had allowed himself to be that close to someone, the universe had taken her away, and he could not bear to let himself be that vulnerable again. I broke up with him the next week. Not because I didn't love him. I did. I loved him so much it felt like a disease, a sickness that had spread through every system of my body until I couldn't imagine functioning without it. I broke up with him because I could not spend another year wanting a man who was too wounded to let me have him. I could not keep setting myself on fire to keep someone else warm. I could not be the girl who waited at the gates forever, knowing the gates would never open, knowing that the keeper had lost the key a long time ago and was too afraid to admit it. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It was also the right thing. I moved on. I graduated. I got a job in public relations in Boston, then Chicago, then San Francisco, a progression of cities that felt like a retreat, each one further from New York than the last, each one a conscious choice to put distance between myself and the man who had broken me in ways I didn't know I could be broken. I dated men who wanted me, who took me to bed on the first date, who gave me everything Derek had withheld. And none of them, not one, not even the ones who were good and bad, who were kind, who made me laugh, who said all the right things and did all the right gestures and checked all the boxes on the list of what a boyfriend was supposed to be, made me feel the way Derek had made me feel with a single look across a coffee shop table. Some people, I learned, are not replaceable. Some people live in you like splinters too deep to remove, and no matter how many years pass, no matter how much new skin grows over them, you can still feel them there if you press hard enough. Derek Harrison was one of those people. ## Chapter 8, The Reunion. For years after graduation, on an October afternoon so crisp and golden it felt like the world was showing off, a day of the kind of light that makes you nostalgic for things that haven't happened yet, I was walking through Greenwich Village when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something, a reflex, an intuition, the same inexplicable pull that had made me look up from my book on that Greyhound bus 8 years before, made me swipe right. Hello? Hey. His voice. His actual voice, not filtered through a gaming headset or a phone speaker or any of the mediated channels through which we had communicated for 2 years. It had been so long that the sound hit me like a memory, vivid, disorienting, impossible to hold, like trying to cup water in your hands. Derek? Yeah. A pause. I got your number from the alumni directory. I hope that's okay. It's fine. I was standing on a street corner in the village, people folding around me like water around a stone, and I could not feel any of them. I could only feel the sound of his voice threading through the noise of the city, reaching into my chest and squeezing. I'm in town for work. I'm staying at a hotel in Midtown. I thought, I don't know. I thought maybe we could get a drink. Catch up. I closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw him, the fairy lights, the peacoat, the expression on his face when he said, I think I love you, Madison. I saw all of it at once, a life's worth of images compressed into a single instant, like a whole movie playing in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Okay, I said. Let's catch up. We met at a bar on West 9th Street, a low-lit place with exposed brick and too many candles and the kind of atmosphere that felt deliberately designed to encourage nostalgia. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a glass of whiskey, and when I walked in and saw him, the feeling that moved through me was so complex and so intense that I couldn't name it. It was grief and joy and longing and relief, all at once, tangled together so thoroughly that the only honest thing I could do was sit down across from him and say nothing for a long moment, just looking. You look the same, he said. You look better. You always said that. I always meant it. We talked. We caught up. He was working at a private equity firm in San Francisco, not far from where I was living. I realized that we had somehow never run into each other in a city of millions. He had gotten engaged, then unengaged, then engaged again to a woman named Claire who seemed, from his description, perfectly nice in the way that people are perfectly nice when they have never been broken open by love. He did not say that Claire was boring. He didn't have to. The careful neutrality of his description, though, the way he spoke about her without inflection, without the particular warmth that people use when they talk about someone they are genuinely passionate about, told me everything. And you? He asked. Are you seeing anyone? Sort of. There's a guy, James. We've been together for about a year. It's good. It's stable. Stable is good. Stable is exactly what it is. He looked at me. In the candlelight, he looked older, not bad older, but the kind of older that comes from time spent, from weight carried. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when we were 22. His hair was shorter. He had the beginning of a gray hair at his temple that I wanted to reach out and touch. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Do you remember that comment? On your Facebook, from years ago. From Phoebe Leon. She said something about no sex being true love. Derek's expression flickered. I remember. Did you ever explain to her? About Christine? He shook his head. Phoebe was my friend. She knew about Christine. She was just being supportive. In her own way. But you never. I never told anyone the full story. Until you. The admission landed between us like a stone dropped in still water. Derek, I said. Why are we here? Really? He was quiet for a long time. The bar hummed around us, laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses, the particular ambient noise of people trying to connect with each other in a city where connection was hard to find. Someone was playing Fleetwood Mac on the sound system, the kind of soft rock that sounds like a memory of a memory, and I found myself thinking about all the times Derek and I had listened to this song in his apartment, had danced to it slowly in the kitchen while something cooked on the stove, had let it become the soundtrack to a love that was never quite allowed to become itself. Because I never stopped thinking about you, he said. Because you're the only person I ever wanted and couldn't." He stopped. He closed his eyes. "I know it doesn't matter," he said. "I know we're not those people anymore. I know you have James, and I have Claire, and we have our lives, and this is just." He opened his eyes. They were bright, wet. "This is just drinks," he said. "This is just catching up. Like hell it is." He laughed. It was the same laugh I remembered, the dry, surprised sound he used to make when I said something that caught him off guard. I had missed that laugh so much. I had missed it like a limb, like a vital organ, like something I had been walking around without for 4 years and had only just now realized was missing. "You're exactly the same," he said. "You're not." "No," he agreed. "I'm not." I reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers curled around mine, the same gesture, the same pressure, the same electricity that had passed between us the first time he had held my hand in that coffee shop on Amsterdam Avenue, and for a moment we were not two people in our late 20s at a bar in Manhattan. We were 22 and 23 and in love with each other, and the world was still full of possibility, and nothing had broken yet, and we were going to figure everything out because that's what you think when you're young and in love and have never yet learned that some things cannot be figured out, only survived. His phone rang. He glanced at it, and something crossed his face, a flicker of guilt, of obligation, of the life he had built that did not include me. "I have to take this," he said. "It's Claire. Take it." He stepped outside. I watched him through the window, a tall figure on the sidewalk, phone to his ear, nodding, his free hand in his pocket. Claire's boyfriend. Claire's future husband. The man who had promised a dead girl he would wait for true love, and who had spent 8 years waiting without realizing that true love had walked into his life on a Greyhound bus and sat 3 rows ahead and across the aisle, reading a trashy romance novel with a shirtless man on the cover. I waited for him to come back. He did. We sat for another hour, talking about nothing consequential, the way the city had changed, a restaurant he recommended, a show I should see, the particular quality of the light in San Francisco in October versus the particular quality of the light in New York in October, a conversation about whether that was really a conversation about missing each other that neither of us was brave enough to have directly. We were civilized. We were careful. We were 2 adults who had learned to manage their wanting the way you manage any chronic condition, with medication, with lifestyle adjustments, with a daily practice of choosing not to act on impulses that could destroy everything. When we left the bar, we stood on the sidewalk outside, and the October night was cold and sharp and smelled like wood smoke and distant chimney smoke and a particular scent of Manhattan in autumn, the best smell in the world, if you grew up in the Northeast, which I had, which he had, which was one of the 1,000 small things we had in common that made our incompatibility so difficult to accept. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "When? Tomorrow? Before I fly back?" "Yes." He leaned in. I thought he was going to kiss me, and I felt my body prepare for it, the whole animal machinery of desire engaging, the same response it had always had to him, unchanged by 4 years and 1,000 miles and a man named James who loved me in all the ways Derek couldn't. My lips parted. My eyes closed. I was ready. But he didn't kiss me. He hugged me. A long, tight hug, his chin on the top of my head, his arms around me like he was trying to memorize the shape of my body, the same way his hands had memorized my body 2 years ago, in a hotel room that smelled like lavender and regret, touching everything except the one thing that would have made me his. "You're it for me," he whispered into my hair. "You know that, right? You're the one that got away. I don't want to be the one that got away." "I know. But you are. He let go. He stepped back. He raised his hand in a small wave, a boy's wave, almost shy, completely at odds with the man he had become. And then he turned and walked north on 6th Avenue, his tall figure growing smaller against the bright Manhattan night, until I couldn't see him anymore, and I was alone on the sidewalk with the smell of autumn and a feeling in my chest that was not quite grief and not quite gratitude and not quite love, but some toxic, luminous combination of all three. ## Chapter 9, The Aftermath. I walked back to my hotel. I lay in bed in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought about Derek's arms around me, about the look in his eyes when he said "You're it for me," about the fact that he was at this very moment lying in a hotel room 2 miles away, thinking about me, wanting me, and not being able to have me any more than I was able to have him. We are not those people anymore, I told myself. We are not 22 and in love with the idea of being in love. We are adults now. We have jobs and apartments and, in his case, a fiancée named Claire who probably made him very happy in a way that was uncomplicated and clean and free of the particular poison that had lived between us from the very beginning. But I will carry him with me, I knew. I had been carrying him for 8 years, the stranger on the bus, the man who wouldn't take what I was offering, the one who taught me that desire is not a transaction, that wanting is not having, that some doors stay locked no matter how long you stand in front of them, no matter how many keys you try, no matter how much you knock. And maybe that is the point. Maybe the ones who get away are not failures but teachers. Maybe the men who break us open are not the ones who stay but the ones who leave, or who can never quite arrive, or who love us in exactly the wrong way at exactly the wrong time. Derek Harrison had taught me what it feels like to want someone with your whole body. He taught me what it feels like to be refused, not with cruelty, but with tenderness, and how those two things can feel exactly the same when you're the one on the other side of the refusal. He taught me that some men carry their wounds on the inside, and that you can love those men, and you can try to heal them, and sometimes they will let you, and sometimes they won't, and either way you will be changed by the trying. I do not regret loving him. I regret only that I cannot stop. The next morning, I checked out of my hotel. I took a cab to JFK. I flew home to San Francisco, where James was waiting for me at the airport with a sign that had my name on it, misspelled in a way that was funny rather than offensive. "Madison," he said, squinting at the sign. "Maudie Eisen?" "Close enough," I said, and kissed him. And for a while, for as long as I could manage it, I pretended that Derek Harrison was just a memory, and that memories were things you could put in a box and store in a closet and never open again. I was wrong, of course. Memories don't work that way. Derek Harrison doesn't work that way. He lives in the walls of me. And I suspect he always will. The end. Asterisk. ## appendix. The years after. 2 years after the reunion in New York, I was 30 years old, and I was engaged to be married. James proposed on a Tuesday night, in our apartment in San Francisco, with a ring he had chosen himself, simple, elegant, not too flashy, exactly the kind of ring I would have picked if I had been the kind of person who had opinions about engagement rings. I said yes because I loved him, and because he was good to me, and because at 30 you are supposed to want these things, the ring, the wedding, the house, the future, and I had trained myself so thoroughly to want what I was supposed to want that I couldn't tell anymore where the training ended and the desire began. I did not tell James about Derek. This was my one major deception, the one lie I carried with me like a stone in my pocket, a weight that I felt constantly but never mentioned. He knew I had dated someone in New York during college. He knew it had ended badly. He did not know that the bad ending had lasted for years, that I had spent 2 years of my life trying to seduce a man who would not let himself be seduced, that I still lay awake at night sometimes and thought about the fairy lights on Derek's roof and the way his voice sounded when he said my name. Some secrets are necessary. I told myself this. Some secrets are not lies but protection, armor you wear to keep yourself safe, or to keep someone else safe, or to keep a relationship intact when the truth would shatter it. James loved me. James was good to me. James was the kind of man who would have understood if I had told him the truth, but understanding is not the same as being able to move past something, and I could not risk his understanding at the cost of his love. So I kept the secret. I wore the ring. I planned the wedding. And I tried very hard not to think about Derek. The wedding was in June in a vineyard in Napa Valley. My parents cried. James's parents gave a toast that went on too long. The food was good and the wine was better, and the sunset was the kind of coral and gold that you see in photographs of wine countries and think must be photoshopped until you see it in person and realize that reality is sometimes more beautiful than any image could capture. I was happy. I want to be clear about that. I was genuinely, sincerely happy, not the performed happiness of someone going through the motions, but the real thing, the thing that comes from marrying someone who loves you and who you respect and who makes you laugh and who is, by every measure that matters, a good man. But there was a moment, during the first dance, when James was holding me and we were swaying to a song I don't even remember now, and I looked over his shoulder and saw the room full of people I loved, all these people who had come to celebrate me, to witness me, to wish me well, and I felt, for just a moment, the absence of something. Not someone. Something. The feeling of being completely, totally, recklessly in love, the kind of love that makes you do things you wouldn't normally do, like message a stranger on Facebook or pursue a man across a city or wait 8 years for a man who wouldn't sleep with you to finally tell you he loved you. I had felt that once. With Derek. I had felt it so intensely that it had broken me, and I had spent years rebuilding myself, piece by piece, until I was whole enough to love someone else, stable enough to build a life with someone else. But there was a cost to that rebuilding. The cost was that I would never again feel for James what I had felt for Derek. Not because James was less worthy of love, he wasn't. He was more worthy, he was everything Derek wasn't, present, consistent, available, but because I had been broken open once and the breaking had changed me. The capacity for that kind of all-consuming, self-destroying, reckless love had been used up. Spent. Burned through like a fire that had consumed all its fuel and left only ash. I loved James. I did. I loved him in the way that you love someone who is your partner, your companion, your friend, the kind of love that is built on mutual respect and shared experience and the slow accumulation of small kindnesses. It was a good love. It was the kind of love that lasts. But it was not Derek. We had been married for 3 years when I saw him again. It was by accident, or what felt like an accident, though I have never fully believed in accidents. I was at a conference in San Francisco, a public relations summit I attended every year for networking and continuing education credits. The conference was at the Marriott Marquis, and I was standing in the lobby, waiting for a colleague who was running late, when I saw him. Derek. He was with a group of people, colleagues, from the look of them, men in suits and women in professional attire, the kind of people who attend finance conferences. He was older, of course he was older. It had been 6 years since the reunion, and time does to faces what it does to all things. It marks them, it leaves traces, but he was still Derek. The same jawline. The same way of standing, still and comfortable in his body. The same face that had lived in my memory for a decade. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just stood there, looking at each other across the lobby of a hotel in San Francisco, and I felt the full weight of everything we had been to each other and everything we had failed to become and everything that had happened in the years since. Then he smiled. And I smiled. And we walked toward each other, because that's what you do when you see someone you know, someone you once knew intimately, someone who has been living in your head for a decade. You walk toward them, you shake their hand or embrace them. You perform the rituals of human connection that allow us to pretend that the past is past and we are all just people, ordinary people, who run into each other in hotels and have ordinary conversations. Megan, he said. Derek. Wow. It's been 6 years. 6 years, he agreed. You look. Don't say the same. I don't look the same. I'm 6 years older. We're both 6 years older. He laughed. That laugh. The same dry, surprised sound he used to make when I said something that caught him off guard. You look beautiful, he said. Can I say that? Is that okay to say? It's okay. What are you doing here? Conference. PR summit. You? Finance thing. Some conference about private equity. I don't even remember the name. Of course you don't. We talked. We caught up. It was the same conversation we had always had, careful, surface level, two people performing the social rituals of acquaintances when they had once been something much more. But this time there was something different. This time we were both married. This time we were both older, and the edges of the wanting had worn smooth, and what was left was something that felt almost like peace. Claire and I got married, he told me. Last year. It was small. Just family. Congratulations. She's pregnant. We're expecting in March. Wow. That's wonderful. How about you? James, right? The one from the reunion? You remember his name. I remember everything, Megan. The words hung in the air between us. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond to something like that, from someone like him, in a public place, with his colleagues waiting for him and my colleague presumably still running late and the whole world going on around us as if this moment wasn't happening, as if it wasn't significant, as if it was just two old friends catching up in a hotel lobby. I should go, I said finally. My colleague. Yeah. Of course. It was good to see you. It was good to see you too. We stood there for a moment, not quite knowing how to end the conversation, how to transition from this charged encounter back into the ordinary world where we were just two people who had once known each other and had since become strangers. Derek, I said. Yeah? Do you ever regret it? What happened between us? He was quiet for a long moment. I watched him think, watched the way his face shifted as he considered the question, as if he was genuinely trying to arrive at an honest answer rather than the easy one. I regret the pain, he said finally. I regret that I wasn't able to give you what you needed. I regret that I wasn't brave enough to let myself have what I wanted because I was too afraid of losing it. He paused. But I don't regret knowing you. I don't regret loving you, even if I couldn't show it the way you needed. You're still. He stopped. He closed his eyes briefly. You're still the measure I hold everyone else against. And no one has come close. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know how to respond to something so honest, so raw, so exactly what I had always wanted to hear from him and had never allowed myself to hope I would actually hear. I'm sorry too, I said. I'm sorry I couldn't be patient. I'm sorry I pushed so hard. I'm sorry I left. You had to leave. I gave you no choice. You had a choice. You just made the wrong one." He smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind of smile that contains within it all the things that could have been and weren't, all the years lost to fear and hesitation, and the particular tragedy of two people who wanted each other and couldn't find a way to be together. "Yeah," he said. "I did. And I've lived with that choice every day since." He hugged me then, briefly, warmly, the hug of an old friend rather than an old lover, and it struck me as I stood in his arms that this was the closest we had ever come to a normal relationship. No tension. No desperation. No wanting that couldn't be satisfied or refused. Just two people who had once loved each other, standing in a hotel lobby, being about the past. "Take care of yourself, Megan," he said. "You too, Derek." He walked away. I watched him go, watched him rejoin his colleagues, watch him become the professional man he had always been destined to become, watch him disappear into the ordinary world where I could not follow. I stood there for a long time after he was gone. My colleague found me eventually, slightly breathless, apologizing for being late. I told her it was fine. I told her I had just been saying hello to an old friend. An old friend. That's what he was now. That was what we had become. I had spent so long being defined by what I couldn't have that I had never considered what it would feel like to finally let go. To accept that Derek Harrison was not mine to want, had never been mine to want, and that the wanting itself had been a kind of illness, a fever that had burned through me and left me changed but alive. I was alive. I was married to a man who loved me. I was building a life that was good and stable and full of the kind of ordinary happiness that people aspire to. And Derek was building his own life, with his wife and his baby and his career, and the two lives would never intersect again, and that was okay. That was more than okay. That was right. Because some people are not meant to be ours. Some people are meant to be ours for a season, or for a lesson, or for no reason at all except to show us what we're capable of feeling. And the measure of our maturity is not whether we end up with the people we wanted most, but whether we can look at the lives we have and find them worthy of gratitude. I found mine worthy. Not every day. Some days I still woke up and felt the absence, still dreamed about fairy light and hotel rooms and the sound of his voice saying my name, but on balance, on most days, I found my life worthy of the one I was living. And that, I think, is the best any of us can hope for. Asterisk. ### Chapter 10, The Years Between. The years after college were a study in controlled forgetting. I moved to Boston first, for a public relations job at a healthcare company whose name I have since forgotten. The office was in the Seaport District, a neighborhood that had been undergoing gentrification for as long as anyone could remember and still looked half-finished, like a sentence that had been started but never completed. I shared a 2-bedroom apartment in Cambridge with a girl named Justine who was getting her MBA at night and who I never saw except on Sunday mornings, when she would emerge from her room looking vaguely startled, like a vampire exposed to sunlight. I dated. Of course I dated. I was 22, then 23, then 24, a young woman in a city full of young people, with all the opportunities for connection and disconnection that implies. I went on dates with men I met through apps, through friends, through the particular serendipity of city living where you run into the same people at the same places and eventually either become friends or strangers. I kissed men and boars and woke up in beds that smelled wrong and learned, through trial and error, what I liked and didn't like in the physical dimension of romance. I did not think about Derek. I told myself this every day, and the fact that I had to tell myself suggested that the thinking was happening anyway, in the background, in the parts of my mind I did not have direct access to. I would be walking to work, or cooking dinner, or lying in bed at night, and I would think about him, not constantly, not obsessively, but with a regularity that suggested he was living in me like a splinter too deep to remove. The memories came without warning. The way he ran his hand through his hair, the sound of his voice saying my name, the expression on his face when he said, "I think I love you," and then couldn't finish the sentence because the feeling was too big for the words. These images would surface at odd moments, while I was in a work meeting, or waiting for the tea, or buying groceries at the Whole Foods on Memorial Drive, and each time they surfaced I would feel the same shock of loss, the same grief for something I had never actually had. I dated a man named David for 7 months. He was a lawyer, which should have been a red flag but wasn't, not because lawyers are bad, but because David was specifically the kind of lawyer that should have been a red flag: ambitious, competitive, always thinking 3 steps ahead in a way that made conversations feel like chess games. He was good to me, in the way that successful men are often good to the women they date: attentive, generous, willing to spend money on experiences and things. But he was not warm. He was not the kind of person who would hold me when I was sad, who would sit with me in the dark and listen to me talk about nothing, who would make me feel like I was the only person in any room we entered. I broke up with him on a Tuesday, for no particular reason except that I woke up that morning and realized I had been waiting for him to be someone else for 7 months, and that was unfair to both of us. I moved to Chicago after that. A new city, a fresh start, the particular optimism of relocation that says, "The problem is not me, the problem is my surrounding." I worked at a tech startup that was trying to disrupt something. I never fully understood what, and I made friends with my coworkers and went to rooftop bars and developed a taste for cocktails that I have since outgrown. I still didn't think about Derek. I still told myself this every day. The turning point came on a night in October, 3 years after graduation. I was at a work event, a launch party for something I had helped promote, the kind of event where people drink too much and pretend to care about things they don't care about. I was standing near the bar, holding a drink I wasn't really drinking, when a man approached me. He was tall, dark hair, a jawline that looked like it had been designed by someone who studied classical sculpture. For a moment, just a moment, I thought it was Derek. It wasn't, of course. The man was wrong in a dozen small ways: the way he held himself, the way he smiled, the particular cadence of his voice when he introduced himself. But the moment of confusion was enough. It cracked something open. It revealed, with sudden and terrible clarity, the thing I had been avoiding for 3 years. I was not over Derek. I had never been over Derek. I had simply gotten better at not thinking about him, which was not the same thing at all. I went home that night and did something I had not done since college. I looked him up on Facebook. His profile was public, or at least, visible to friends of friends, which is how I had found him the first time. I scrolled through his photos, his posts, his life. I saw photos of him at work events, at restaurants, at what looked like a wedding, a coworker's, I guessed, based on the context. I saw photos of him with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, a pretty Asian woman with an easy smile and the kind of casual elegance that suggested she came from a different world than the one I inhabited. His fiancée, Claire. I sat there for a long time, looking at that photo. I felt everything at once: grief, jealousy, regret, relief, longing. I felt the full weight of the years I had spent trying to forget him, and the futility of that effort, and the terrible knowledge that some things cannot be outgrown, only survived. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I did not sleep. But I did not message him either. I did not reach out, or confess, or do any of the things I might have done if I were still the 22-year-old who had pursued a stranger on a bus. I had learned, in the years since, the value of restraint. I had learned that some doors, once closed, cannot be reopened without causing damage. I had learned that loving someone sometimes means letting them go, and that letting them go sometimes means accepting that you will never fully let them go at all. I let him exist, from that night forward, in the space where unresolved things live, not quite forgotten, not quite present. A wound that had scarred over but never fully healed. It was the best I could do. It was not enough, but it was something. Hashtag chapter 11. The reunion expanded. The reunion itself, 4 years after college, in the bar in Greenwich Village, has already been told. But there are things about that night that I did not include in the earlier account, things that I have saved for this moment because they are too significant to bury in a narrative that was already crowded with significance. The first thing I did not say, when I saw him, when I walked into that bar and saw him sitting at the corner table with his glass of whiskey, I felt my breath catch in a way that I had not felt in years. Not a small catch, a full stoppage, like someone had pressed a hand to my chest and said, "Wait." I stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking at him, and I felt the full weight of everything we had been to each other crash into me like a wave. The wanting I had thought I had buried rose up from wherever I had buried it, fully formed, completely unchanged by the passage of time. 3 years of trying to forget him, and he was still the measure I held everyone else against. The second thing I did not say, when we were talking about nothing consequential, about restaurants and shows and the quality of light in different cities, I kept waiting for the magic to break. I kept waiting for the spell to lift, for me to see him clearly, for the person I had been idealizing for a decade to reveal himself as ordinary. But the spell did not lift. He was still Derek. Still the man who had refused to sleep with me, who had broken me open with his restraint, who had taught me what it felt like to want something so badly that the wanting became its own kind of pain. The third thing I did not say, when his phone rang, and he said it was Claire, and he stepped outside to take the call, I sat at that table and thought about getting up and leaving. I thought about walking out of the bar and out of his life again, the way I had done 6 years before. I thought about the pattern, how we kept finding each other, kept connecting, kept failing to become what we might have become, and whether breaking the pattern this time might finally allow us both to move on. But I didn't leave. I stayed. I waited for him to come back, and when he came back, I felt something I had not expected to feel: peace. Not resolution. There was no resolution. There would never be resolution. There was only the endless unfinished business of two people who had loved each other in the wrong way at the wrong time, but something adjacent to peace. Acceptance, maybe. The acceptance that comes from seeing someone clearly and choosing to see them anyway, even knowing what they cost you. The fourth thing I did not say, when he hugged me at the end of the night, when he whispered "You're it" for me into my hair, I felt myself beginning to cry. I did not cry. I had trained myself, by then, not to cry in public, not to let the emotions show unless I was in a place where showing them was safe, but I felt the tears building, felt the pressure behind my eyes, felt the grief of losing him again even as I was still in his arms. I let him go. I stepped back. I watched him walk away. And I knew, with a certainty that felt like knowledge handed down from some higher authority, that this was the last time. That we would not have another reunion, another chance encounter, another night of fairy lights and unfinished sentences. That this was the ending we had been moving toward since the first time he stopped, in that first hotel room, and chose not to take what I was offering. It was not the ending I would have chosen, but it was the one we had earned. Hashtag chapter 12, the present. I am 34 now. I have been married to James for 4 years. We have a daughter named Sophie, who is 2.5 and who has her father's calm temperament and my stubborn streak. We live in a house in the outer Sunset, a neighborhood in San Francisco that is perpetually foggy and feels, somehow, like a place where things grow. James knows about Derek. I told him, eventually, not everything, not the full decade of obsession, but the broad strokes. The man I couldn't have. The relationship that never was. The reason I had been so reluctant, in the early days of our dating, to let myself fall completely. He did not judge me. He did not rage or threaten or demand explanations I was not prepared to give. He simply listened, and when I was finished, he said, "Thank you for telling me. Do you have any questions?" I asked. "Just one," he said. Is he still the measure?" I thought about this. I thought about Derek, and the fairy lights, and the sound of his voice saying, "I think I love you." I thought about all the years I had spent holding him up as the standard against which all other men would be judged, and how exhausting that had been, and how unfair to James, and how unfair to myself. "No," I said. "You're not measured against him anymore. You're measured against what I want. And what I want is you." He kissed me then. We went to bed. We did not speak of Derek again for a long time. But I think about him still. Not every day, not anymore, but sometimes. When I am driving home from work and the light is doing something beautiful over the bay. When Sophie does something that reminds me of myself at her age. When I hear a Fleetwood Mac song in a store and feel, for just a moment, the ghost of the girl I was at 22, sitting on a bus, looking at a stranger's face and knowing, without knowing how I knew, that he was going to change everything. I do not regret any of it. The wanting, the waiting, the years of trying to forget, the reunion, the letting go, all of it, the whole messy, painful, ultimately transformative experience of loving someone who could not love me back in the way I needed, was a passage. A doorway I had to walk through to become the person I was always meant to be. Derek Harrison taught me what it felt like to want. James Chun taught me what it felt like to be wanted. And Sophie is teaching me what it feels like to love without wanting anything in return except that the person I love should be happy and safe and whole. That, in the end, is the lesson. That is what love is trying to teach us, if we let it, that wanting is not the same as having, and having is not the same as loving, and loving is not the same as being loved. That we can want things we cannot have, and have things we do not love, and love things that do not want us back. And that the measure of our humanity is not whether we get what we want, but whether we can love well in spite of all the ways love fails to be fair. I loved well, in the end. Not perfectly, there is no perfect, but well. And that is enough. That has to be enough. Because it is all any of us have.